And it is 5:45 and we're on Belt of Truth Live. Welcome everybody. I realize it's a little after 5:45. Praise God for technology and for overruling some pretty major glitches there in the streaming software. But I'm Scott Ritzema, your host for our weekly program, and we are live right now, Wednesday evening, Eastern Time. Our special guest, Joshua White, I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But those of you who gather for these live ones or you watch this after the fact, you matter. You matter a lot to us. You are the very reason we are here doing this. So thank you. And the very reason, in addition to the glory of God. So here we are at Belt of Truth Live. Thanks to our sponsor, First Things First, Revitagard. I've actually been spraying this recently quite aggressively on the throat. Stuff is going around this time of year. And praise God, been fending it off with the help. And here's a testimonial. I've had good success with the Revitagard and Revita Sinus. I won't make you watch me spray that one up the nose. I highly recommend these products. One user said, and many people, we have hundreds of testimonials. If you go to that QR code, you can read a lot of the good experiences people have had, like this one. My wife, kids, and I use Revita Throat. It's called Revitagard. And nasal sprays most days, meaning when things are going around, you don't need to use it all the time. But even when the kids are getting into all kinds of things, interacting with other families, we rarely get sick. I attribute this to, more importantly, good diet, 8 laws of health, and then a little bit of immune boost on the top helps. So that person says, thank you, and you're welcome to that person and all. And I want to also hear who's joining us, where you're joining us from. And so give us your shout outs, and we want to acknowledge you and welcome you. So thanks again to that sponsor. We'll see that on the way out. So where are you watching from tonight? And we'll say hello to each viewer as they pop up on the screen. Or if there aren't any yet, we'll just come back to that. I'll introduce our guest, our special guest, Joshua White, comes to us from A Thinking Generation. That's a ministry that's been going for nearly 10 years now, I believe. And Joshua has done hundreds of live events, live streams on the topic of true education, child development. And so you're going to be able to pick his brain with Q&A in a little while. I'm going to throw some questions at him. We'll keep them brief tonight and keep things moving along. But get ready. Load your questions up in the comment thread so that we can have that dialogue and you can ask any questions about child development, family dynamics with those, especially early childhood years that Joshua White specializes in. You can find him at A Thinking Generation, athinkinggeneration.org. That is singular. Generation, we want it to be just one more generation and then we can all go home. So welcome, Joshua. And if those shout outs come up, Jeremy on the back end, just throw those up and we'll make sure we welcome people as they come. So Joshua, thank you for being here. My first question for you is actually, I was thinking, you look at kids these days, they're struggling. And that's nothing new, really. So I see a very serious need for your message, your ministry of helping parents understand child rearing and true education in the home. And so I wanted to ask you, how are you seeing kids are doing these days? Welcome, Sharon, by the way, from Knoxville. Joshua, take that first one.
Wow, that's a good question. That's a big question. I think we could sum it up by saying that Satan is attacking from all fronts. I think never in history have we seen this attack coming from so many layers. It used to be maybe parents had to worry about one thing, some bad influences here or there or something. But now we have an all-out onslaught, this attack from media. We could spend a lot of time talking about that, as I know you've gone into that a lot. We have the education perspective, and I think maybe we'll get into that a little bit in our program today, but just looking at how education really transforms who we are, and Satan understands that. So there's two systems of education, and he's working very hard through that, be that in the schools, be that even just wrong methods even used wherever the location is. And then we have environment, we have city living, and many other things that we could talk about. So how are children doing? Well, they're struggling. And I'm thankful in my travels, in my seminars, I've seen many parents who are working hard to stem that tide. And by God's grace, they're doing an amazing job. And we see that generation of young people that is being raised up to fear the Lord. But it is not easy. And children are really struggling today.
So when you're talking about your ministry is dedicated to true education, right? A thinking
Hmm.
generation, wanting our young people, your tagline says to be thinkers, not mere reflectors of other men's thoughts. When most people hear the word education, they're thinking, okay, making sure my kid can do math and learning the academics. What
Right.
is true education? You said it transforms who you are. Well, what is
Mm.
true education then?
Okay. Wow. Another big question, and unfortunately, we don't have a whole week of seminar here to go through. But if we could summarize it, I think first of all, we need to understand there's a great controversy, right? And Satan has a counterfeit for every truth that God has. He has a false for every truth. So, we could look at that from diet, we could look at it from evangelism, we could look at it from so many levels. But if we boil that down, okay, true education versus false education, there's a great controversy. God wants to prepare us for heaven. So his plan of education will be something that prepares us for heaven. And Satan's going to come along and say, well, actually, here's another plan. And the difference is that Satan's plan just prepares us for life on this earth because it stops there. So there's a major difference. A false plan of education will just prepare us for life on this earth. God's plan of education, which is often termed true education, is that which will prepare us for heaven. Now, what does that look like? Maybe I can just summarize. It's going to, first of all, I think there are three main components that we could look at in true education. First of all, it's focused on redemption. Now, what is redemption? I've been teaching on this for a while, and I would always focus on the educational standpoint and be like, okay, how do we define education? But then I realized the real issue is we're not defining redemption correctly. And I love how it says in the book Desire of Ages that redemption is that process by which the soul is trained for heaven. So, okay, redemption is a process of character transformation. And in God's plan, redemption and education are the same thing. That's a quote from the book Education. It says, in the highest sense, the work of redemption and the work of education are one. So that's point number one. Okay, true education and redemption have the same focus. We're working for a character transformation for heaven. Okay, point number two. How is that accomplished? Well, in worldly methods of education, we just focus on pouring the information into the mind. And I know, Scott, you as a teacher also can relate to this. A lot of the training we receive and a lot of the methods that are used in education today are focused on content delivery and content retention. How can we deliver this content well, and how can we help the student to remember it? And it's very focused on the mind, just getting information into the mind. God's plan of education is holistic, and it involves all three areas of our being. That's the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And then, so first of all, it's about character transformation. Secondly, it's about transformation of the whole being, not just information in the mind, but uh, physical work. It's about spiritual development and the mental development to go along with that. And then, third, the major component of true education is about preparation for service. And the reason for that is we need to understand that Jesus has given us a great commission. We have a job to do, a mission to accomplish to enable Jesus to come. So we need to be focusing on the fulfillment of the Great Commission. And that is one of the great purposes of true education. It is to raise and equip that generation of young people to finish the work. So it's focused on transformation for heaven through transforming the whole being, physical, mental, and spiritual, focused on preparing soldiers in the Lord's army to finish the work. And I believe if we follow that, then we can see the work finished and Jesus can come. So it really
Amen.
plays a vital role in the last day's work.
Yeah, I've read that in the last days there will be an army of youth, rightly trained,
Amen.
that will finish the
Amen.
work. And that's exactly how do you train is what you're teaching and talking about. And so, what are some of the biggest mistakes that are being made in the maltraining of children? You alluded to some of it there, where it's like
Mhm.
focus solely on the academic, on the mind. You're missing out on those other pieces. You had mentioned media. What are the biggest mistakes that you see that are being made in the world, and then also what are the biggest mistakes that you're seeing being made amongst those who are actually trying to raise their children for the Lord?
Mhm. Okay. I think there's maybe two that I could focus on. The first would be, I would say, we are often getting our priorities a little bit mixed up, if you will, in that we're often focusing a lot on the information in the mind through academic training at quite an early age, because that is the method of the world. We focus heavily on academic readiness. And as I travel and I'm in different countries, people say, "Oh, it's a little different here. It's not the way it is in the U.S." And yeah, okay, it's different everywhere. But the fact of the matter is that worldwide, our focus has become in education, our focus has become academic preparation from a pretty early age. Whereas the Lord gave us some counsel in 1872 when we first received this counsel, as we were told that the only schoolroom for children up until the age of 8 or 10 should be in the open air, and their only textbook should be nature. And this has been a major area of my research for the past over a decade, actually, that I've been doing this ministry, and looking at what children should be learning at the right time. And that's a question I get all the time. How do I know my children are learning what they should be learning? That's a great question. So the Lord has told us in the early years, we need to focus on character, but the world is focusing on academic preparation. And when you look at the science, there's a window of opportunity, if we're talking about brain development, to develop a character for heaven. And yet, the academic learning, it's a total myth, really, that you have to learn it at an early age or you're not going to learn it well. In fact, the research shows you can learn it better. If you wait till 8 or 10, especially for boys, they're going to learn it much better after the age of around 10 or 12 than if you try to start it earlier. And so you actually, well, you give yourself more time by waiting on the academic training, and you can focus on the character development. And that's exactly, of course, that's what Satan does not want us to do. He does not want us to utilize this window of opportunity for developing character. He wants us to focus on other things and get distracted. He doesn't care on what. And so he's developed this masterful plan that we're focused on academic training in place of character development. So I would say that would be a number one major issue that we're seeing today, is that we're focused on the wrong thing in the early years. We need to be molding a character for heaven, and we're getting distracted with other things.
When you said
Now,
early years, you're
yeah,
talking till 8 or 10. I mean, that's shocking to most people. I remember the first time I heard
that's true.
this. Joshua's been a big influence on me, by the way. Folks who don't know and haven't followed our ministry for a long time, we're friends. And when I started reading this early on in my journey, it was like my brain just revised it, like, no, it can't possibly be 8 or 10. And then we were talking and we were studying. He's showing me this research where it's like actually kids who learn to read, who have received reading instruction later, end up as better readers with better reading
Mhm.
comprehension by age 10 and 11 than if they started early at age 5. So is that a question you sometimes get where parents are anxious? They're like, no, I got to give them a head start. And if they don't start the academics at 6, they're going to be behind and they're not going to be smart. What do you say to that? I mean, other than just trust God and the counsels he's given us.
Right, trust God in the counsel he's given us. But at the same time, I could take the next 3 hours and go through the science that shows it absolutely true from a brain science standpoint. And then we could also look at just statistics and data and the hundreds, probably thousands of young people I have met whose parents followed this method. They waited till 8 to 10. And it's in the data, it's in the research, it's there. They do very well by waiting. And we understand why by looking at the research behind it, that the areas of the brain that are responsible, the logic areas we often refer to them, they're not developed enough to be able to understand the abstract concepts and the sitting down and the reading and the writing and things like that. They're not developed enough in girls until about 7 or 8 years old, and in boys till about 9 or 10. And we see the results. So, yeah, parents feel that pressure, and I totally understand that. But the key is just, look, we need to see how God sees it, right? And look at God's perspective and not the perspective of all our friends.
Yeah. You had a second big pitfall that I jumped in on you. Were you going to go on to
Oh,
enlighten
sure.
us? Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe I could say it like this: Satan would be perfectly happy for us to study the Bible and even to have Bible class as long as we're not applying it. Because the Bible even says that the devils believe and tremble. Now, here's the issue. As I know you understand this as a teacher, also, Scott. In the traditional educational environment, we focus so much on giving them the content. And it's about learn it now, take 10, 12 years, however much time you learn in school, and you learn it now and you'll use it later. And how many students, probably it's got to be 99.9% of students, have said at some point, when will I ever use this? And that's a legitimate question that we need to be asking. And it's one of the greatest pitfalls I've seen passing that age of 8 to 10. Okay, now we're getting to doing more academics. We're still not making it practical. In God's plan of education, we learn for a purpose. And many times it's about having the purpose and then learning for that purpose rather than the reverse that we usually do in conventional education, where we start with learning and then we hope they find the purpose for that learning sometime. We tell them, okay, you're going to use it someday. In God's plan, it's the other way around. You learn for a purpose. You have to put it into practice. Okay, why is that important? Because how many of us have gone to church, we listen to a great sermon, and we go home, we say, that was a wonderful sermon. And we stop with that. But that's not how God designed it. Satan, as I said, Satan will be happy for us to study the Bible and not apply it. The key is, and I believe this is one of the things that Satan greatly fears, this is part of that army rightly trained that will finish the work, is those who learn and apply. And that starts in the early years. It starts with practical everyday learning where we create an environment. Let's just take math for an example. Okay, you're in the kitchen, you're cutting sandwiches and you're learning fractions. You're incorporating it in everyday life. Okay, then maybe you're doing a building project and you've got to learn the Pythagorean theorem to be able to calculate the rake on a truss, or whatever, rafter length on the truss, something practical in a building project. Or you're working in the garden, you need some geometry, you need to calculate the area or something. Those are just some examples from math. But as you have the reason to learn, then you're connecting this abstract academic learning with what's going on in real life. And so you're able to then see the reason for your learning, and you learn that, or the child learns that what they're learning can be applied and should be applied. And so then that transfers over into spiritual things. And we don't just start learning for the sake of learning. What does it say in the scriptures? It says, ever learning, but never coming to a knowledge of the truth. And we read in Studies in Christian Education, that wonderful book by E.A. Sutherland, he said, it's a distinct element of false education that the teachers repeat the same things they learned in school, and then those students graduate and they repeat the same things, and it goes on generation after generation. God doesn't want it to go on generation after generation. The point of education is not just to learn. It's about to gain the information that is needed and put it into practice. The book Ministry of Healing says, it is only when we learn and put it into practice that the education is of any value to the student.
And this method that the world uses, it not only wastes a lot of time and makes children frustrated that they're not using, and it's not usable, practical. I mean, it's just so not common sense. A lot of it
Yep.
is just spinning your wheels. But also, what does it do to their thinking abilities? I mean, let's go back to the name of your ministry, A Thinking Generation.
Right.
How do God's methods teach us to be thinkers, not mere reflectors of other men's thoughts? And what are the Satan's methods that are being used that actually turn off the ability to be critical thinkers?
Okay, yeah, fantastic question. And again, let's quote that from the book Education. That's page 17. It said, it is the work of true education to train thinkers and not mere reflectors of other men's thought. That was such a light bulb moment for me when I first read that, and I was thinking about my training as a teacher, and I'm like, wait a minute. We spend year after year literally teaching reflectors. We give students a set of textbooks, which, what are textbooks? It's a collection of other men's thoughts. And what do we tell them to do with that? We say, memorize it. And as teachers, you hope they memorize it long enough for the test, right? It's crazy to even say it like that, but that's the reality. We're training reflectors. And so that's a major part of it, is making what they learn practically applicable to everyday life, whether that's math, whether that's science, whether that's reading, whatever's going on in the educational journey, they need to be putting it into practice. That teaches them to think. And there's a lot of other things that we could talk about. How about a lack of physical activity? Children are so sedentary today. They live lives primarily indoors, and they're not getting a lot of physical activity. But the research shows that for children younger than about 8 or 10, they need the majority of their day spent in physical activity. It's exhausting to the parents, of course, but they need it for proper development. And what the research actually shows is physical activity targets the part of the brain, parts, I should say, of the brain that are helping with moral decision making. The anterior cingulate cortex, for one of them, the genu of the corpus callosum, the hippocampus, and there's a lot more that we could look at. So physical activity is a big one. Media use. How much does social media actually train us to be reflectors of other men's thought? What are you doing on social media? You're looking at what other people are doing, right? And so that's another way that we're teaching a reflector. Another big one, and this is a huge topic, but the whole issue of age segregation. Children are spending the majority of their lives, whether it's in school, whether it's in sports, dare I say in church, with other children the same age as they are, other youth the same age as they are, other young adults the same age as they are. And we've chopped it up into all these segregated categories. Where's the opportunity for children to learn from those who are older and wiser and more experienced than they are? I think that's intentional of Satan. He's trying to break this up. When God created the family, we read in the book Education that in Eden, in his original plan of education, God centered it in the family, which is an age mixed environment. So there's another way we're teaching reflectors, because in that peer group, what are they doing? They're just learning to reflect what others are doing. Yeah, a lot more we can look at on that. But this, we're told, is a purpose of true education, is to train a thinker, not a reflector.
Let's go to the earliest, so the early childhood years. What
Mhm.
is the best research and wisdom on those toddler years? Is it we already know what you've already shared. You wouldn't be a fan of, one of the most heartbreaking things to me is when I'm driving down the road and I see a little like 5-year-old kid standing with a backpack at the bus stop ready to get on a bus and saying goodbye to their mother. It just is
Mhm.
so unnatural. Talk about that attachment, that bond from
Mhm.
babyhood, and
Mhm.
what the devil is doing to mess kids up by Head Start
Yeah,
programs, preschool, even kindergarten.
yeah. Yes, right. Well, if we're talking about emotional development, we know from a brain science standpoint that emotional security lays a foundation for cognitive development. And I think maybe I just need to repeat that. Emotional security lays a foundation for cognitive development. This is why when we have a child with a learning disability, a good researcher is going to look at their home environment. And many times they might find divorce, neglect, abuse, something like that. It's actually triggering a learning disability. And the research shows that children need a secure connection with their parents, especially mom. It's not to say dad is not important, but in the early years, mom is extremely important in that emotional bond with the child to be able to form their security, their secure base. And this varies. The amount of time needed varies with the child. Generally, we can say about 6 to 8 years. Boys often need more time than girls, surprisingly. We often think it's the girls that need more, but boys need more time generally with that emotional security. Once they have that secure base, then the brain gives this little a sigh of relief, and it's like, okay, I've established my base of security. Now I can go learn. And so children are actually going to do better academically if we focus on emotional security in the early years. Um, we have an indication of this in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10, a verse that I'm sure we all know well. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. This word knowledge in the English language just generally means to us information. But in the Hebrew language, that word knowledge meant intimate connection. And so this is talking about education. These are educational terms, wisdom, understanding. And it says a knowledge of the holy is understanding. And it's saying a connection, a relationship with God is the basis of true education. Okay, relationship with God. That should be the purpose of all. Christian growth and development to strengthen our relationship with God. Where do we lay the foundation for a relationship with God? That's going to be in the home. That, and this is scientifically based also, the connection and relationship that a child has with their parents in the home, especially with mom in the early years, forms the basis. We could say the mirror or the foundation, the jumping off point for their relationship with God. And I've seen it a lot in my counseling and consulting that I do with families and young people, many young people who actually want to have a relationship with the Lord, but they're really struggling to form it because they never, and I learn in talking with the family and understanding the background, they've never really had it with their parents. They never had that strong connection with their parents. And that can be one of two things. It can be the parents sending their children off to a child care center, daycare, preschool, kindergarten, all these things at an early age. That is an emotional disturbance in and of itself. But it can even happen in the home as parents are just so busy and they get so occupied with many things that the child's emotional development is neglected. Think of the Deuteronomy method, one of the greatest examples of true education in the Bible, right? This is the model. And I have a whole sermon just on this one verse in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6 and 7. And it gives parents the model for true education. It says, number 1, verse 6, it says, these words which I command thee this day must be in thine heart. So what do we understand there? God's words in the heart of the parents. What does it mean if something's in the heart? Well, it's transformative. So this is saying that parents themselves have to be transformed. We have to become that example to the children. But then step 2, we find that in verse 7. And it says, when you're walking by the way, when you're sitting down, when you're rising up all day, every day, you're doing things together. And so you're building this connection and relationship. And that's what the research shows. It builds the foundation in the child's brain so that later on, they're going to feel more free to learn and they'll actually do better academically. So this whole idea of Head Start, sending them off, not only is it the wrong time from a brain development standpoint to learn academics, but it's also making the problem worse by creating an emotional disturbance that's going to make it more difficult for their learning process later on.
And that's proven in the research. There was a researcher out of Tennessee where they had done this Head Start program, and it was by lottery. So it was a randomized controlled trial. And you're familiar with the study. And the researcher couldn't believe what she found. And when she published it, she was like, I don't even want to publish this. And all my colleagues hate me because she was proving from the research that kids that did get into the Head Start program to have the benefit of it, by the time they were in middle school, in every grade in school and in the behavior, they were below their counterparts who didn't get the Head Start. And it only got worse as the years transpired. We did a whole video on that on Belt of Truth YouTube. But, I've got one big question for you. I want to make sure, though, I'm not crowding out anybody else with Q&A. So we're going to go to Q&A shortly. But Joshua, while we wait for those questions to queue up, I want to ask you, where can people follow you and so on? And when you were saying, do you have time for 3 hours on this? I'm like, yeah, people need to watch your complete A Thinking Generation, Educating a Thinking Generation seminar. And even that little booklet, 10 Principles of True Education, that you have on your website. I've read that to my family like 5 times. Like you're still part of our family. Our families are so close. They love hearing from you through that book. And so I hope folks go to athinkinggeneration.org, get the booklet. How do people watch your seminar other than ordering the DVDs? And how do people just support your ministry in general? You mentioned you offer counseling services. What can you do for folks? Give us your kind of what your ministry does and how people can get some resources.
Sure. Yes. Okay. So yes, you can go to athinkinggeneration.org. I'm sure we'll put that in the link here somewhere on this video, athinkinggeneration.org. And there are a few ways. So first of all, you can purchase the materials from the store. There is that DVD series and a lot more on the store that you can purchase. And we have that in DVD or USB format. We also have available on our website now for digital viewing, and that is available in both English, Spanish, and subtitled in French. So different languages there available. Another thing you can do is invite me for a seminar. I do those on a regular basis, and I actually have a couple of slots remaining this fall. So if you want to grab something last minute, there is that option. And definitely supporting through donations is a huge benefit. I receive a lot of requests, especially from mission training schools, which I love and support, These are really preparing young people to finish the work, but often they really struggle to meet those expenses. And so those donations to the ministry help me meet those requests for help that aren't able to be paid for, as well as the ongoing, costs of the ministry. Um, and then, of course, uh, consultations. Yes, as was mentioned, you can fill that out on our website. I offer consulting for schools, for families, for parents, whether it's a learning disability, whether it's, hey, how do I get started with true education, and everything in between. I offer that service, and that's on a donation basis. So, yeah, just head over to athinkinggeneration.org. Also, YouTube. We have some videos. It's not a super active YouTube channel, but there's some videos there you can watch online. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. And Jeremy, do we have any questions that you want to bring up? Folks, if you do have questions, ask them. This is your chance, your opportunity. And by the way, I want to know if anybody watching right now has been following Belt of Truth Ministries and A Thinking Generation long enough to remember the big fundraiser, the big accident. Joshua was nearly killed in an accident. So we've been on a journey together, and I know some of you have already gone to bat for him on the financial side, and I just appreciate all of you supporting him in that way. Welcome, Linda. We didn't get all our shout outs in earlier. Some folks joined us later. We did have some technical difficulties at the beginning. I'm glad we're doing this and it's working. She says she wishes that she had information on how to deal with her adult child who has Asperger's. That's not so much Joshua White's specialty in the special needs in the adult population, but do you want to comment on that?
I would say in that situation, it may be better to do a consultation, and I could do a questionnaire and understand a little more. But as you said, it's not my specialty.
Yeah,
I would be
yeah.
more able to speak to those children.
Linda is praying for our ministry every day. Thank you, Linda. We appreciate you a lot, and every one of you who is viewing. So there's our friend Jeremy. Shout out to
Hey,
Jeremy in
Jeremy.
Alabama. Don't you love that we're talking across Missouri and Alabama and all over the world? This is great. Well, while we're waiting for more questions, here's my question for you, Joshua. Tell me about kind of, you've got a kid, 3-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever. You got kids in the home that are not yet 8 to 10.
Hmm.
And they're not yet school age, right? So you're
Hmm.
not necessarily doing the academic work as you would at a later age. What does a good day look like? Describe kind of, because moms might be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to. I don't know how to
Hmm.
homeschool a little
Hmm.
kid. What does a good
Yeah,
day look like? And not that it's
it's
an
a great
exact,
question.
template that you have to
Sure.
follow to the minute every day, but are you reading to
Yeah.
kids? What are you doing? Are you, sending them off? What does that day look like ideally for
Yeah.
their best development?
A very good question. And I would say simplify. We try to do too much. We try to overcomplicate this, and we go looking for all the best curriculum. We're worried about, oh, are they going to learn the right thing at the right time? Simplify, just relax, especially in those early years. And I would say the best curriculum I can give you is live life together. True education is a lifestyle. Okay, so it's getting up in the morning, it's spending time, just like Jesus did. I just want to interject this. I get the question a lot from parents when I talk about how you need to live life with your children. And they say, but where's my me time? And I say, well, when did Jesus get his me time? It was in the morning when he got up early before his disciples got up. And so parents have to do that. They have to connect with the Lord. And then as the children wake up, you're spending time with them and connecting them with the Lord, reading a Bible story to them, talking with them, connecting with them. And then you go prepare breakfast together and you clean up from breakfast together. And I know the parent there with a 2-year-old is saying, no way, you don't understand my 2-year-old. That is not going to be cleanup. No, but the point is not to get a job done. That's a mindset we need to change here. It's about living life together, connecting with them. Okay, so you're cleaning up from breakfast together, and then you go outside. Maybe you work in the garden, maybe you go for a walk, you do an activity together, you spend some time talking, and it takes forever, right? When you have a toddler in tow, everything's going to take a lot longer. Savor the moment, just enjoy that. And then you're going to come in, you're going to prepare lunch together. You're going to spend again in the afternoon doing things together. have evening worship together. And, that's how you start off. And then as the child has interests, as they grow and they mature and they get interested in things, yeah, you start pulling books off the shelf. You find things they're interested in. You start asking relatives and friends that may be able to teach about things and give them more experiences. And it just grows from there. The most important thing is that first step in the Deuteronomy method, and that's the parents are connected with God. We're such in the habit of looking to friends and can I just say men? I think even as parents, we're trying to train a thinker, but in reality, many times we're becoming reflectors of other men's thoughts as we're looking for that perfect curriculum, or we're looking to, well, what are my friends teaching their children? That's not the point. God wants an individualized education for your child, specifically to prepare them for their place in His work. And so parents have to connect with the Lord, seek that direction from Him. And as they do that, it's going to grow.
Absolutely. And you're going to bed early in order to get up early as a parent to have your
Yes.
time with the Lord,
Yeah.
right? So we're not
Amen.
up watching Netflix till 11 p.m. In fact, kids are going to thrive best when they go to bed early to bed, early to rise,
Amen.
when they eat a nutritious diet, when the meals are properly spaced apart or not snacking in between the meals, like just like you mentioned in that sort of design of the day there. And I love how much outdoors time that's come up a few times. Nature is so beneficial for children,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And just the
Yes.
light exposure, right? I mean, if kids are
Right.
indoors and reading books at 5 and 6, and they're doing all this near work, I know you talk about this, Joshua, in your
Yes.
seminars. That increases risk for myopia massively, right?
Absolutely. It does. Yeah. This research shows children need a minimum of 3 hours in full daylight every single day for proper eye health to prevent myopia development. The worst thing you can do for a child's eyes is put them in front of a book or a screen before the age of 9.
Yeah, yeah. And reading to kids is good for their literacy development years before
Certainly.
they're reading, right? I mean, that's not just there's no harm in that, but it's actually a positive thing. So you have worship, right? You're reading to them, and
Certainly.
I remember noting this in the research that kids being able to read early at age 5 is it does not predict later quality in reading, but when
Yes.
they can make clear distinctions in the sounds of the phonics in the words at age 5, then they are able to read better later. And that comes from
Mhm.
conversations too, right? Not
Exactly.
just I gotta sit and read to them for
Just
3 hours a
vocabulary.
day, right? Like you were saying, we put pressure, just be natural, just live life.
Yep.
I just love that
Right.
perspective. Oh, here's a fun anecdote. I was just talking with we were doing a study, and there were children in the context in that, and it was the book Steps to Christ, and there was a pretty complex sentence. Welcome, Janet from Maine, and the leader of the worship paused and directed a 10-year-old and said, "Did you grasp the meaning of that sentence?" Now this kid has only been reading for like a year or two, okay, and bam, he explains the sentence with
Yes.
just like exactly like as an adult would. And so it works. It's just this is one anecdote. You've got all the research, but Jody says
Yeah.
the first thing my parents taught me was to know and love Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
That has guided her life and made it the best. So Sandpoint, Idaho, welcome, Dwayne. And Joshua, what else do you have to say? I know we got to wrap up pretty shortly here, and I did the torturous thing to you of you've got hours and hours of content. We're truncating it into like 30 or
Right.
45 minutes here, but
Yeah.
what else do you want to share? Because I don't see it. I welcome Ella. Is it
Hmm.
Ellie? Appreciate all of you guys. If you have questions, throw them up there too. Other than that, welcome from South Carolina, Anthony. Anthony, glad you're here. Joshua, what did you not get to say? Because I didn't ask the question that you got.
Oof.
3 minutes. What do you
Of
want to? What do
course,
you
there's
want
a
to leave
lot,
people with?
but the thing I can say is just like I've already said, we're too much in the habit of looking to other people. And I would say if I could leave one thing with the parents, from the families that I've seen, from even the schools that I've seen who are doing a really good job, it is those who are looking to the Lord, who are studying the counsel He has given us. We have a treasure trove. Go to the book education, study that, make it your textbook. Then take out Studies in Christian Education by E.A. Sutherland if you like a little bit of history and want to understand the contrast between true and false education. Living Fountains or Broken Cisterns also. Fundamentals of Christian Education, Counsels to Parents, Teachers, and Students, Special Testimonies on Education. That's a great one. I think ATG is the only one printing that, actually. So yeah, those are all available on our website and from other sources. Study that. And that is how the Lord can lead us and we can have that army rightly trained. So that's the word I would leave with the parents.
I love it. Pick up those books at athinkinggeneration.org. Folks can watch my True Education seminars too. As I told you, Joshua had great influence on my family and my thinking, and we got into the parenting and True Education seminars ourselves. Exposing the worldly schooling agenda. The seminar is called Schooled, the Deliberate Agenda to Destroy Individuality, Reduce Intelligence, and Re-Engineer Society. Check that one out at beltoftruth.tv. And the follow up, Undoctrinated, How Home Education Will Produce the Last Generation. And then Raising the Remnant, the parenting seminar. All those can be viewed at beltoftruth.tv. Jeremy just gave an endorsement, I think, probably for special testimonies on education, because Joshua said that one is his ministry is the only one printing that. So get over there. Yeah, Adventist Home also, child guidance also. We've got so much of a wealth of content there, and we're so
And if I
blessed.
could just mention, we are just finishing. My mom actually has been the major writer in it. Nearly 600 pages of true education on a practical level for parents. So head over to A Thinking Generation, subscribe to our newsletter so that you can know when that gets released, and donate to help us fund the cost of this. Thank you.
Yes, and thanks to our producer, CDN, Christian Digital Network. From likes to lives changed. Scan that QR code to subscribe to CDN's YouTube channel. And Jeremy, thank you again for running the show, and Joshua for joining us, and all of you
Thank you.
guys for being here with us. It's been a real blessing. Be blessed in the Lord, seek his ways, and you will find the desire of your heart, which will be Jesus Christ. Well, I'll see you all next time, Wednesday, 5:45.